Coaching with Awareness. We're going to talk about psychometrics, assessments. Today I have with me Nandini and Rahul. Most of you joining in may already know them. Nandini is the CEO of TVR Learning Systems, and Rahul is wearing many hats, and so is Nandini. They both are coaches, facilitators, leadership development experts, and specialize in their own area of assessments. With that, Rahul and Nandini, do you want to say a hi and a quick, intro in addition to what I already said?
Yes, Smita, thank you so much, first of all, for organizing this. It's a topic so dear to the heart. And, with these, there's always the opportunity to meet new people. It's the best way to reach out. And I tell you, as much as you share, you walk away from these things having learned a thing or two. So I'm looking forward to the questions and the engagement.
Thank you, Smita, and for inviting us to this webinar. And once again, looking forward to all the knowledge that one has accumulated coaching, the knowledge that we have learned. And also, like Rahul said, I think this topic is very dear to us. We have experienced and experimented with a lot of psychometrics and assessments. So happy to share our views, our insights, and knowledge with the audience. So thank you once again for inviting and for organizing this.
Absolutely. It is my pleasure. So we have, participants joining in from different locations. Maybe a few are coaches here that I can already see, and maybe there are a few who are non-coaches. So Sinjan from Kocharya team is going to put here on the link the program, the upcoming programs at Kocharya, which is for ICF level 1 and level 2 programs, which is in the month of August and also for the month of September. So in case any of this catches your attention and you would like to know more, you can email us at support@kocharya.com. Sinjan, if I can request you to put the email ID as well. Feel free to reach out to us on that email ID and we will get back to you. Also today, by the end of the session, even if you have any questions for Nandini and Rahul, you can reach out to them through us, and you can use the same email ID as well, support@kocharya.com, and we'll be happy to share those questions with you, Nandini and Rahul. And if the time is not enough, you can take it up later as well. All right. So let's get started, with this context that we're talking about assessments today. And as coaches, Nandini, Rahul, in the coaching conversation, we always start with the current reality, right? Like we have the goal in mind, of course, but we come back to the present. And then from there is the exploration towards the future. While assessments, as recently have gone through myself a training program, so what I know is it's not predictive of anything. It does not talk about the personality of an individual like cast on stone. However, it definitely helps one to show a mirror and give some insights so that with those insights, coaching conversation can become powerful. So let's start with that context. And the first question, Nandini, for you, as coaches, can you share your views and experience as what is the role that assessments play in the coaching process? Just adding on to what the thought that I shared.
Absolutely. So Smita, just, for the audience, just share, there are typically two types of assessments. One assessment is where other people rate you. It could be either a multi-rater feedback or you could have a 360-degree feedback. Another type of assessment could be where you have a development center. Some companies call it assessment or some call it development center. So you could have a report in both of these assessments. The assessment is normally done by other people. So that's one set of assessments. And then you have a second basket, which is where you have psychometrics, where an individual or a coachee himself takes or herself takes that particular instrument. So for all of these, whether you have an assessment by yourself, where it is a psychometric, or whether you have assessments using multi-rater or you're using assessment development centers, I think they add immense value to the entire coaching process. And a couple of pointers, or where I have seen it really adds value is number one, I think you get live understanding and better self-awareness. Because coaching is such a wide area, if you can start with additional awareness about yourself. A simple thing, for example, in one of my coaching conversation, I had my coachee take a value questionnaire, and this coachee wanted to work on, managing her productivity because she wanted to get time out to spend time on meditation. And when I had her take the value questionnaire, it turned out for her, harmony is the most important value. And that gave me a little bit of insight. Okay, so meditation is important because the insight was that harmony is possible only if you're calm in your mind, and meditation is a tool. So I think self-awareness, and the coach also gets a lot of better awareness. So that is number one. I think it really helps with that. The second point, which, typically I have seen in coaching engagements is you can sharpen the coaching goal. Because imagine a coach, just starts with what would you want to work on? That is so broad. Where do you really start? But if you have some data coming to you, so let's say in one of the instrument, it turned out that a person doesn't disclose too much. So you come to know, okay, there is a problem that maybe the person is misunderstood. So you can see correlations, you understand the coachee better. And I think the coachee also, can build the goal and sharpen it as we go along. So I feel these are, additional self-awareness as well as sharpening your goal, because coaching can be very, very broad. I think these are, these are the top of mind aids in which the assessment helps in this entire coaching journey. I'm sure Rahul may have a lot more to add to it.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Actually, I'm so glad, Nandini, that you talked about the assessment where it's observed assessment. One should not discount it. I mean, there's a very flawed assessment that is always on, report or no report, which is every time two people meet each other. So immediately a scanner will start, you will size up the person in front of you. It's human nature. I mean, you need to ascertain the person in front of you, either they're going to friend or a foe. Okay, so it starts with that. Only thing is, it's a very biased way to assess people because you're assessing people based on your experience, your likes and dislikes. But if I was to talk about a formal way of assessment, I'm so glad Nandi brought that up because I'm thinking that unfortunately, most things that are useful started through war. Human beings are such a violent species. Everything has come from war. And it was the Chinese, I think, initially who were in the late 19th century started to adopt the model of what would be equivalent of assessment center. And early 20th century, there was a lot of psychology in the Austro-German area, right? And after the defeat of the Germans in the First World War, one of the things they arrived at that, look, we had a problem with the kind of officers we selected. There's got to be a more scientific way to get better officers in. So it was actually a performance measure that they were looking for and how to assess and filter in the right people. So yeah, I mean, that assessment is always on, human assessment is always on. But when we come to psychometric, I feel that, again, the scope of coaching can be so wide. At what level are you coaching? Is it a personal coaching? Is it executive coaching? So let me first pick the example of, let me give example of like, in executive coaching, what is something I find is at play. A lot of people who qualify enough for a company to make an investment in a full-fledged executive coaching usually are also going through a personal shift at that time, right? You find that they are sort of, turning the corner around 40, approaching it. All the things they've believed may no longer be holding true, but a lot of the ideas, a lot of the belief systems are becoming outdated now. So we start with that understanding to psychometric allows us to help people see what are their driving motivations, because you don't realize it, but motivations also keep shifting over time. From that socializing hedonistic type of like lifestyle, suddenly you start to become more stable, get more ambitious. At 40, another shift is taking place. You're discovering yourself all over. Now, why psychometrics help? Because it's kind of like putting an X-ray scanner on a person. all along you've operated from a certain belief system, a script given to you by society or your upbringing, and suddenly you find a lot of it is not working for you anymore. So this idea of values card, examining what are the values that are driving you today. The generic purpose of coaching, of course, is for people to become better at what they do, right? That's what they come for. It's not counseling, it's not therapy. They've come to become better. So therefore, what's important is for people to get self-awareness, like what Nandini talked about. Uh, and what always helps a person is if they are willing to accept the fact that we don't know ourselves as much as we think we do. You discover you have gifts and strengths that you've overlooked. Everybody is very concerned about the gaps that might come out, but no, there are hundreds of gifts that are waiting. You don't know that once you put brush to paper, you might discover an artist in you, or if you sing outside the bathroom, you maybe are a gifted singer, whatever it is, or you experiment with something. So I think self-awareness is key. I think if people are open to the idea that they don't fully know themselves, psychometric will reveal to them that's what's going on with them. As coaches, our job is to help them to self-accept. Because sometimes people also resist. For so long, they've lived without the knowledge of or self-limited belief systems. Our job is to help them to embrace that new discovery. And so in conclusion, I will agree with Nandini. What it does, once people are self-aware of their strength, what they're missing out, understand that what motivated them one has now changed, the landscape is changed, then it allows them to have a more targeted coaching contract. And once the coaching contract is targeted, it really accelerates the coaching outcome because it's like completely zoned in. You're not wasting time going left, right, center. Without assessment, sometimes 1 or 2 sessions will go only to arrive at what the real problem is. We know for a fact, stated problem is never the real problem. It's the story behind the story. And many times a good psychometric will help you start with that story. So to me, yeah, tighter coaching contract, faster outcomes, and also very powerful rapport. When you read somebody psychometric to them, you build a connection. Yeah. So those are the things. Yeah.
Wonderful. I'm very curious. Nandini, you made a point about that there are two kinds of, assessments. One, when somebody is, assessing versus when you are actually filling in that form and, that gives you kind of a report. Could you just throw some light in terms of the difference that you see in terms of when somebody else doing it, a report versus you yourself doing it, that kind of a report?
So, Smita, especially when you are doing a leadership development. Okay, so let's say I'm using coaching for leaders in an organization. I think there, the assessments done by others versus assessment done by you really helps. And, typically because the challenge when you are coaching leaders is, number one, they are successful. The minute that title comes, they have a lot of inner confidence because they know they have got there because they have mastered the art of success. They know what is it you need to do to get there. But on the other hand, while they are very confident at a leadership position, it is not about what you know. It is about how you behave, how you conduct yourself. So on the one side, you have these very confident people, and on the other side, you have, sometimes little things that they do may get magnified because they're at the helm and, a lot of role modeling and people may land up picking that up. So how do you actually coach? How do you get them, like Rahul was saying, that show them the mirror or, make sure that they are aware and then they own it. It becomes very difficult as a coach to just be that mirror because you need to have some kind of data and it needs to start with them looking at themselves in the mirror. So at such a time, it's always better to have assessments by others. So if you have a development center feedback, or if you have a 360 report where there have been 15 other people who have, let's say, seen your impatience, then, they have to, if you have 15 comments where everyone has said that you are impatient, you will have to pause and reflect a little bit on it. So for those kind of coaching engagements where you're working with leaders, it always makes sense to have assessments by others, either by strangers or by 360-degree feedback. Then it lands very easily because then you can say, you can also say, okay, there seem to be some comments about your wanting to do things, your achievements. So when you reflect, what do you think you have learned? What is something new? What is something that you knew? And what is some of the new that has come across? And then we can gently nudge them and, then get them ask powerful questions to figure out. And they may get an insight that, oh, my drive is very good, but somewhere I'm not managing my strength good enough. And it's actually landing up creating more of negativity. My impatience is actually resulting in people leaving the organization. So I think especially when you have senior level leaders, when you have people sometimes who are defensive and the brief has been that there is a trust issue or people are very defensive and they don't know it because they, a lot of rarefied air at the top. Then I think assessments by others, and then eventually you could add psychometrics wherever you feel it is necessary.
Amazing. And this also brings me to that point Rahul made, that when leaders are getting ready for a senior role, for example, and they themselves are going through some internal changes, nothing is like cast on stone. So it's like, when you introduce assessments at that point in time, it may give you the picture of that time and show the mirror for that time for you to know how coaching can be impactful.
On that part of, feedback from others, I've always felt, especially if you're making some behavioral observation, then, those feedback by others done in the beginning and the end of a long intervention make more sense. Many times people ask you, should I repeat the psychometric? We are going through a 9-month journey. Should we repeat the psychometric? I sell psychometric. I would love for them to buy more psychometric, but it's not the right solution, because the name of the game with the psychometric on personality is not to change personality, right? For example, if I am really nice to you, Smita, but somebody comes and tells you, but have you looked at his personality report? He's awful, right? You won't care. You'll go with your experience of me. You say, no, but he was helpful to me. He was polite. He was kind, blah, blah. So people are interested in the way you make them feel. Doesn't really matter. And so the personality psychometrics job is to tell you where you stand, where your personality is serving you, and where you need to adapt some behaviors. Sometimes I think the personality drives us like this invisible puppeteer. We want to believe that personality works for us, but I think most time we are working for our own personality. And the only way to counter it is to not fight our personality, but rather adapt certain behaviors. Now, many times behaviors are to do more, but as much, and sometimes more so, it's about doing less, that you become better. So in answer to the question of the assessment by others, one thing I've seen is that leaders are very aware. They're very aware they have blind spots. And they also understand very well that all their fabulousness has come from every blind spot they conquered. So they are not waiting for feedback. They seek feedback. They're really looking forward. They're interested in the content of the feedback, not the intent and tone. They seek feedback. So yeah, that was my 2 bits on that.
Thank you. Nandini spoke about, senior leadership, and Rahul, maybe you can throw some light on what happens when, for senior leadership in organization, they want to go ahead with a program, maybe leader as a coach, or, coaching, executive coaching and stuff like that, without actually assessing at what point they are today, right? What happens then?
Yeah.
Sorry,
go ahead, Rahul. No, go ahead.
No, in fact, I was going to take a clarification. So Nandini, why don't you go?
Yeah, so if I hear you right, Smita, that the organization wants to go ahead with it, but leaders are not sure where assessments fit in, and maybe they don't really know the power of assessment. So how do you actually help them? Is that the question?
It's more like, the organization is actually embarking on a leadership program without having gone through taking the leaders, take any of the assessments. So there's no assessments that has happened for them. And we are directly embarking onto a leadership journey.
So, what Rahul had pointed out, you could have, I will add on to what he shared, you could have 2 sets of leaders. Having worked last 25 years in the space of leadership, I have always seen that there are 2 sets of leaders. One is a set of leader who is very aware, like he said, they love feedback, they thrive, they reflect. Every day they spend some time reflecting because they know very well what is the amount of effort they have put in to get there. So they're very aligned, they're very pro development, they value it, they really reflect on the feedback they get. But there are certain set of leaders that we have worked with who are somewhere, just the fact that they have been so successful, they don't really feel the need to keep going back to the drawing board. They don't want to spend that time because they are very busy doing other things. So, especially for the second set of leaders, so let's say they are amazing at their domain knowledge, but they're interpersonally not very there. So they have issues like they're a little abrasive in the boardrooms or they're very impatient. So, very often leaders have got where they have got because of their impatience. They have that typical type A personality where you're always doing things. What happened to Smita?
Sorry, I just
Okay.
lost my connection.
Oh, you
Yeah, I lost my connection. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. So you could have leaders like that. For them, it is very difficult if they don't get to own it. Because remember, in coaching, it is the coachee who takes the lead. Therefore, one has to make sure that whatever lead they take is in the right direction. And when you have people at that level who believe that they've got all the answers to all the challenges, and how do you therefore get them to see the mirror? How do you get them to make sure that they are working or choosing the right kind of goals? There I feel, especially for those kind of leaders, it's important to have some kind of feedback which makes sure that the goals that they are setting out to do, they are appreciative of it and they want to take it on. So it's aiding them. I would say that it's like a farmer who's helping till the land, and then you can sow the seeds. So the tilling, the kind of preparation that helps them get the best out of this coaching journey, and especially for those kind of leaders who have achieved it, but may have, sometimes they say brighter the light, darker the shadows. So you could have leaders who are really good, but the shadows they cast is something maybe they just don't know. They're just busy doing things they've not realized. So I feel, especially for those kind of leaders, they may be few and far in between, but for them, I think assessments are important. And normally the organization sponsor will let us know what are some of the issues, and they will know, because especially some of these leaders who have challenges, it is very visible to everyone around. Other than the leader himself, I think it's very visible. So in the brief, we would know what is the kind of situation, and then I think these are tools which can help leaders get the best out of the journey. So that is the way we would approach it.
Mm-hmm.
Smita, I
Thank you.
see a question from Soumi also. Should I respond?
That's it, exactly what I was. Yeah, please take if you want to take that.
Yeah, I'll take a shot at it. So listen, Soumi, I mean, the thing is, I don't think leaders need to get into anything that's operational. Their job is to take decisions. It's always useful for a leader who's rolling out a psychometric for his team to have gone through that psychometric also. So at least they know the language. Their job is not to be able to interpret it, but their job is enough to be able to understand what that report is all about. Some expert can come and tell them that here are the few things I've picked out from this report, give them a summary of it, but they don't need to become experts on interpreting. That's not their job. They just need to know the key essence of it. They should be able to understand. But yeah, what certainly helps is having had the same medicine they're serving to their direct reports. So also it's a very useful thing to have that conversational thing. I always suggest that, like when we are trying to introduce psychometric, like a Lumina, which we use, it's a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit high on the price point. We always say start with the pilot group of leaders, then crack it from there, because then that's where conversation starts. Now, going back to the question that Smita brought up, I kind of think of it like this, Smita, that most of the programs are done without any assessments and psychometrics, frankly, right? Some of it may be just the lazy business of filling tick boxes. But even at the senior leadership, where there is investment scrutiny and eyeballs, you would think maybe there'll be a lot more effort that will be put into it. But then on the other hand, they do work. It's not like they don't work, right? Like I always say that, look, a doctor will still do his doctorate, right? He will be able to, kind of. But if you give the doctor blood works and the reports, the doctor will be that much more powerful. So most of the today training program and even the quality of trainers in our country have like become so sophisticated. So there's really a lot of high-end trainers and facilitators available. The last 10, 15 years, there's been a huge leap in the quality that's available. So, and also the methodology of running programs and all has also become so sophisticated. There are multiple ways to run programs. The whole process of running case studies, examples, facilitation has all made training very, very powerful. But the big difference that remains is without a psychometric, it's a generic, process that is rolled out, a generic teaching that is given over there. The difference with the psychometric is uh, that if you have a psychometric, you know what your strong traits are, what are some of the areas you need to work on. And most of the trainings, if you think about it, there's some level of competency being taught over there. If you think of most of the programs, collaboration, conflict, executive presence, communication, decision making, blah, blah. And in different jargon, we sort of, kind of roll them out in a leadership program also. So a psychometric can help you to understand which piece of that competency I have to fix. That's what. So it helps you to target. So a simple example. If I'm sitting in a workshop for, let's say, emotional intelligence, it helps me to understand, do I need more self-awareness? Do I need more empathy? Do I need to dial up my motivation? Do I need to have other awareness? Do I need to dial up my social set? What is it that I need to do? So it helps me to target which are the areas, because no matter what workshop you and I go to, half of it, if maybe more, we're already good at. We need to just tweak that one part we are missing to become better. Like, maybe my executive presence is, good on 2 out of the 3 elements. So which is the part that I need to tweak up? I want to put my focus there. So psychometric, I think that way, not only power up the program, but I think from a very outset, if you have a psychometric on the team, for the entire team, your entire design of the leadership journey is targeted to the need rather than just picking up what's trending.
I like how Rahul said most of the things we are good at. So it's just to again, we are just zeroing to that point to say that assessments really help to sharpen our focus on very specific things that we want to work on rather than keeping it very broad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. And Nandini, to your point, and where I actually lost my connection, where you said that, and Rahul also made that point saying there are two kinds of leaders, and we are not looking for those leaders who already have that awareness and, that zeal to work on themselves. We are talking about the other category where the mirror has to be shown, and, for them, we need to take them through the assessment and all of that. So when there is no buy-in from the organization, is there a way that you kind of nudge them to say, and what is it that you really say there to make them aware of assessments, and what is your sales pitch, if I can understand that?
Well, so, we will suggest only if we feel it is going to add value. So let us say if you have, maybe out of the entire, it's an entire leadership team, let's say, and there is a newly formed team, some of the CXO level people are new, and the entire issue about how do you build collaboration, and somewhere there is a feeling, let's say the voice survey showed that trust is an issue in this newly formed team. Now, if you want to work on trust and if you want to coach everybody on trust, it makes sense to just figure out what is it, because even trust is such a, everyone may be coming from their own experience, from their own, what they hold. So what holds true for Smita may not hold true for Rahul, and maybe it's something very different for me. So because each one of us are so unique, and because the way our brain operates is so unique, I think we must have this and try to decode what does it mean for you. And Smita, like you said, there are two sets of leaders I had mentioned. One is who is always open to feedback and one who is not. I think using psychometric, even for those who are open to feedback, they're always getting something new. I may have done an MBTI a few years back, but next time I do it again, there is something new which I've learned about myself. Because I think in this world, the more you know, the more you realize how much ignorant you are. I think that is really the sign, because, every degree we get, we realize, oh, how far away are we from another degree, or there is so much more knowledge. It's literally like there is no end to the knowledge you get. So we have seen leaders who are very pro development. They approach the psychometric. Okay, I already knew this. What more did I get to know? So what is it that I knew? And are there those little, dimensions? They could be even micro observations or micro learnings which I got out of this. So psychometry will benefit those who are even pro and those who have a lot of those blind spots, and they need to kind of reconnect with what have the chemistry that they are generating. So what we do is we try to understand what is it required, and if there is a situation where no psychometric may be needed, or let's say they just have a voice survey and there are some kind of murmurs which, let's say the sponsor has told us this is something that you need, then we may just go ahead with it, and we may then suggest only to individuals who may need it. So suppose I have a person who's, always externalizing, and I can make out, let's say in the first few conversations, that problem is with X, problem is with Y, and the person is completely fine. Then I may suggest a simple instrument called locus of control. Where is your seed of control? Is it outside or is it within you? What do you attribute your success and failure? It's a very simple instrument which will just give an aha moment to the person, that why do I keep externalizing things? So, if we have some basic knowledge, and I think what Saumi really asked, some psychometric, we don't need to be experts. They are very simple constructs. You read a book, let's say by Professor Uday Parikh, and you will know. And they are very simple instruments. You don't need to be a psychometrician. But there are certain set of sophisticated instruments, like you could have a FIRO-B and MBTI, where you need to be trained. So there you have an option that a psychometrician or someone who's accredited does the interpretation. You can sit through when they're doing it, and then you just pick up the broad essence of it, and then you can poach on it. So both options exist. If you're using simple constructs like the locus of control, I think read a little bit on it, and I'm sure, because you don't have to give suggestions. You have to just pick out the outcome of what has come out and help the person discover a little bit more. So I feel that is something, to answer a slightly long answer, but I think at 2-3 levels, that one, you can use simple instruments. You don't need to be an expert. Second, you can decide who needs it. If the entire group of leadership doesn't need it, you can then suggest what is relevant. And third, you will suggest based on where do you think the block is. So based on your initial conversations, it's exploration. You are not labeling anyone. So you're okay to explore. You're also exploring with the coachee. And if the genuine interest is, yes, how do you help the coachee discover more? By all means, I think you should read up a little bit more, pick up whatever instrument and share it with the person.
Thank you so much. Thank you. There is a question here on the chat by Professor Rao. He says, coaching to discover blind spots and discover the unknown requires different technologies. What, in your experience, are these?
So I think on the two sides of things, I find, and of course I'm basing it on a psychometric that I know, which separates the personality into the three persona that we talk about. Your motivation versus your behavior, and versus your overextended behaviors under stress situations. So a couple of things happen, the blind spots. One is, and you'll know this, especially those who are parents, we tend to project our preferred style of working. The tidy parents want even the socks to be folded in the sock drawer. So what happens, our strength becomes our filter to look at the world. And we find it in missing in other people, it causes us unconscious biases, right? And many of us are actually, as we are beginning to unravel our childhood, to discover the warped adult we've become in the long run, we discover that the expectations that were laid by our caregivers in many ways formed the parameter of the good or bad within us as capabilities. So what we like, what we are good at, what we are naturally built for, we tend to look for it, and the absence of that causes unconscious bias. That's why we end up creating clones around us. That's why we tend to look for the tried and tested in the familiar. That's why even though the opposite is the person who'll complete me, I find myself also at conflict with those people. because I don't understand the word, right? Like I am a softer person, I'm more people focused. I'm best complemented by an outcome driven person, but I tend to get lost. So one is your strength over projected tends to create unconscious bias. The other thing is when we are under stress, then oxygen, of course, escapes our brain and runs into our muscular system. So thereby, our decision making goes down because the head is now flooded with cortisol, adrenaline, all of those kind of not so very helpful in the long term hormones, and we are making poor decision making. At that point in time, as I say, logic follows emotion, no matter what we want to believe, right? In the sense we have a reaction and then we try to logic. That's why you find people standing at a airport counter or a hotel line, and if they're getting restless, they start shouting. And if you try to tell them to calm down, what are they going to do? They're going to bare their teeth and say, I am calm, but they're not calm, right? And then they'll tell you I'm shouting because without that, nobody will listen to me. So blind spots, what tends to happen is I have a logic. Therefore, I can't see the aggressive outflow or the complete withdrawal and shutdown that I am doing. But other people are experiencing that. They're not interested in my intention. They are measuring me for impact. So I don't realize my blind spot. And even when I get feedback, I tend to defend it. Why? Because my rationale is there. Which is why, because of these blind spots, you'll find actually some of the very smart people, like we talked about, like Nandini said, they are already leaders. So they are seduced by their own success in the past. Many of the leaders have an addiction. It's called the addiction to be right, right? Because it's worked for them. Many of them are also very high on their success, which is why I find many companies after two successful ventures will put all or bust in a third venture and then go, belly up. Why? Because there's overextension. And that happens because of the blind spots. They don't know where to stop themselves. So absolutely, I find that one of the biggest things that get uncovered is the blind spot. So I find at mid-level management, uncovering of blind spots through psychometric is the best gift you can give them. But at higher level, what's happened is they've navigated through. Now their gaps don't matter. Why? Because there's a whole team around them to cover for their gaps. Now even their overextension people have learned to tolerate because they've earned their right to. At the senior level, I think most time people, when they go off the road, is because they overuse their strength and refuse to listen otherwise. Which circles me back to that topic that Nandi was talking about. How do you go about telling people to introduce psychometrics if they're not particularly open to it? I'm going to speak from my both sides of my mouth right now. I agree that, so this is the consultant in me, okay? I would say if psychometric is not needed, don't put the money in the psychometric. Let it come into consulting money to me. So, because psychometric also costs money. And I'm giving some commission to somebody. So, you know what? If it's not needed, let's not worry about it.
Yeah.
But on a serious note, it's also, if the topic is very well defined, which is the need of the hour, then you don't need psychometric. You need certain teaching skills. Then take the psychometric out. Why? Because psychometric has a way to dominate the story. On the other hand, because I like psychometrics, because I'm good at it, because I know if psychometric is part of their program, then that much I don't have to prepare. It's already there. And why it still works. So I may be giving a selfish reason, but why it still works. One of the most fascinating, probably the most fascinating topic for all of us, me, myself. Right? I meet Nandini at a party. I start reading her, palm or whatever, or I do some face reading on somebody, or somebody, I start reading your handwriting, Smita. You'll all get fascinated, right? We're always looking to get self-discover. So one thing that never gets wrong, if it's a good psychometric presented well, it always pitches in. So the truthful answer is, I do angle for the psychometric if I can. I know that, believe in it. It is my bias, but if the topic is such that it is actually addressing the need of the hour and a psychometric might be an overkill, yeah, then not needed. We use Lumina. So many times in Lumina, just using the Lumina aids like the cards and the mat and all of that, we don't even need the report to give a little bit of a self-discovery feeling in the beginning. In fact, you did something like that recently, where you just use the mat, the card, no report. So sometimes I find, okay, you know what? Psychometric doesn't have to be the hero here. The topic is identified. Let's not blur the two. So like I said, there's a win either side. If they don't need the psychometric, move the money to the consulting. If they take the psychometric, you can't go wrong because you're telling them about them. So
Yeah. So no one size, fits all. It's like that discovery call, which kind of, gives us an indication whether what to do, right? I think so. Rahul, you spoke about blind spots. Dr. Rao had asked, and then Moshmi has a question. Nandini and Rahul, if one of you want to
Yes.
take it.
I'll
Um,
take that. I just wanted to add something to what Rahul said. So, this entire thing about when do you suggest a psychometric or when you don't. So the thing is, Rahul, sometimes when clients ask us and we understand because there may be resource constraints, you don't want to, spend. So there are situations where, and this is to the entire audience, whoever is here, there are free psychometrics you can use. There is this book called Training Instruments in HRD and OD by Professor Uday Parikh, and very simple tools called personal effectiveness. You have what I told you, locus of control. You have something called ASUFA. You have transaction style inventory. All the coaches need to do is just spend a little bit of time. You will have the instrument there and you can give it, and there is no additional cost. It's only your time of the coaching. Now, there are also lower cost tools. So, TVRLS is set up by professor. It's a professor who taught in IIM Ahmedabad for 25 years. So, a prof is of the belief that, you also don't price it. You do have other tools which may be very heavily priced. But so we have consciously priced it at very low. It can be as low as just 500 rupees for a tool. So it's not really, something that you need to invest. So clients don't need to blink an eyelid. Sometimes it's just included as a part of it. And, there's not really much charge because compared to the cost of coaching, the cost of the psychometric is much lesser. But when you look at a 360 and you look at assessment development center, those are very intensive because 360 has a very sophisticated process and a DC requires for a group of 12, 6 assessors. So these are very resource intensive. There is a question of budgets, and obviously you need to have the blessings of the budget makers and of the sponsor for this. So that is how you have options even if you cannot afford it, but it is important to put it because everyone wants, like Rahul was saying, you go to a party, you want to see your palm, you want to see your kundli, you want something live which is very specific to you. Otherwise, you don't have a bind. So there are always options. So please look at that where there is a resource constraint, more effort from the coach. If you're genuinely interested in your coachee, you will somehow find a way to include that and you genuinely feel the person will benefit. That's number one. Number two, to Moshini's question, what happens when psychometric 360 and assessment? So here, one very important thing is 360-degree feedback is by people who know you. So there is a chance of bias. So imagine you have let's say a front office person, and the person is only doing, there is no strategic role, and a 360-degree feedback is done. Now, number one, you have never given this person who's an office front desk to do anything strategic, and 360 is only by people who know her and who are seeing her. Therefore, you will get feedback only on what they see, and if they are biased, some amount of that bias will come in 360. Assessment Development Center is what you are capable of. So in that report, if a front office desk individual is put through a simulation where she has to come up with some kind of strategic thinking, she may be surprised and she may turn out to really get high marks on strategic thinking. So you can have contradictions because a 360 is by known people and only on the role you are given. Whereas Assessment Development Center is what you are capable of and it is by total strangers. And psychometric is in between. It is your belief about yourself. So at some point, you could have contradictions largely between 360 and assessment development centers, but you will have more congruence or more similarity between either the psychometric and the DC or the psychometric and the 360. So you could have differences between 360 and assessment development center, but you will not have differences between the psychometric and one of these unless you have taken it in an agitated state or you have put socially desirable responses. That is, you have put what you would like to be instead of what you think you are. So I think it's not too much of a problem, and I wouldn't suggest you use all. You would just need to use one or two of them. Because having too much, it's like having multiple diagnostic reports. It'll only confuse everybody. Stick to what is important. If it is coaching for a potential role, then look at a DC data. If it is currently in the role, how do you be more effective? You could either do a 360 or you could use a psychometric.
Sure. Thank you, Nandini. There is this question on the chat. The book that you mentioned, are you okay to type that in the chat box, Nandini?
Yeah, absolutely. I will. And someone has asked
Oh,
Manjusha that can you list the budget-friendly assessment tools in the chat and the book that you said. So training instruments in HRD and OD is completely free. I think a CD comes with automatic scoring and check in Amazon. You will get it. You will have a version with the CD and a lot of new editions have come up. So that is zero cost. It's only your time. So you can put a cost on your time. And other instruments, I know, for example, an MBTI, I'm sure some of us are MBTI accredited. The cost is 2,000 rupees per person. You will have lower, like I said, from TV Rao Learning Systems, all our tools are priced at 500 because we've consciously, because of Professor Rao, he always wants to make it accessible. So we have instruments like motivational profile. We have a simple Johari window-based personal effectiveness, locus of control. So there's a list of all of those. I will also share our website. So the range it's 500 rupees plus GST. That's what it is. Rahul, you can share a little bit about your instrument. I wouldn't know the price, so you can share what the range is like.
Yeah, but that's on the higher side, I would say. Amongst the premium tools, it's not the most expensive, but it sits on the higher side. It's a 9,000 rupees Spark report, which comes with the mobile app, the workbooks, and everything. There's also a lighter version which does not have three persona, but the app is a very cool feature because if you've done your Spark, I've done my Spark, I can scan your report on my report. We can see the common value systems, the complementary skill, the areas of conflict. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do. Obviously, that kind of investment is gone into building that tool. And if it's like, global footprint, then the costs all add up. So it sits over there. But we have an India price, so we find ourselves, given our comparison usually tends to be with tools like the advanced MBTI and Hogan, etc. We are sitting in a good price point over there. Also, there are other tools, comparative tools, but many of them, I don't think they're that present in India. So simply to say, there are a lot of tools that offer a lot less but are priced more high because they are not marketed or priced for India. So that's on the pricing part of it. Yeah, that's it.
sure. I have another question for you, and I'm making it again a bit, generic for us to understand. Coaching, we know, come from the space of not knowing, right? And when we are saying coaching with awareness and the psychometric, so what are some of the ethical considerations to be kept in mind while using these, psychometrics for in the space of coaching?
Yeah, I've got a whole list over there, so I can talk about some of them. And I think it starts with every uh, entrepreneur is trying to solve some problem. And Stuart, with his own experience, Dr. Stuart Dessen, founder of Lumina, found that most assessments are loaded with evaluative biases. It is natural. History is biased, science is biased, everything is biased. It's natural because the viewpoint of the person plays in. So he tried to work on a test using language which was all inclusive, testing model using Likert scales and all that would give true preference of people, interpretation of ensuring that each trait is celebrated. Otherwise a lot of traits have a tendency which are reflective of whatever is the zeitgeist at that time, to say things like, like ambition is the most important. Or, like like I used to teach Hogan as well earlier when I was distributed Hogan. That time, everything was ambition trumps everything. So on the reverse side of it is that if you don't have ambition on your score, then you're kind of falling. And unfortunately, in Hogan, the score was skewed in Hogan, so in ambition. And that used to trouble a lot of people. They would say, on one hand, you're saying ambition trumps everything, and then my score is low, and you're trying to tell me it's a statistical problem. So these things tend to pigeonhole people a little bit. Then there are tools that would just promote like that extroversion is the thing, right? So how do you go about making sure focusing on the fit rather than the feature, right? There's a job for every personality, and there is a personality that suits different jobs better. So I think the evaluative bias both from the science and both from the language. Simpler, cleaner language, comparing the tool, whatever was a big part. So I think the absence of that can cause a problem. In the sense, suppose people are taking tests, they are not very comfortable with the language, then the output that comes from the test can be uh, so the output that comes out from the test can be a little bit biased because the person ends up responding in a test in a non-favorable way. Sometimes some tests tend to be a little bit skewed, intentionally or otherwise, I don't know. And then now, of course, most of the new tests are cleaner. That would adversely impact, let's say, people uh, who were either representing a minority group or neurodivergent people. It would sort of screen people out. So those are one part is the evaluative biases. Some tests tend to have that. Other part is science and validity, right? Depending at what level and how you're using a tool. Sometimes, like I said to you, sometimes we don't even use a report. We just use the frameworks of Lumina in a fun way. It gives some direction. But once we are going deeper, then I think reliability, validity becomes very important. Is the test internally consistent, right? Is the different criteria that it's measuring are indeed being measured, right? Is there a global sample that's available, that we are working on? One thing I find a lot of problem in India. So these are two things I talked about, right? One is the evaluative biases. The other thing I talked about is the science of the tool. The third part, which is like a very practical one, I find many interventions happen, and I know I'm sure Nandini will have her own experience. There's oftentimes not enough clarity when you're rolling out the psychometric, why you're rolling out the psychometric, who will have access to it. So there is a lack of clarity and communication. There's not enough consent taken. People should be given the freedom to not disclose their personal information. In India, in particular, there's not such strong safeguards against this. Second is what is the data protection in today's world where data is becoming such an important thing. So that becomes a thing, and people's right to privacy. Because a deep psychometric will reveal a lot of things. With like if you look at Lumina, when it talks about the three persona, you can actually see where the person's psyche split in their childhood. What was the story between that happened at a dining table long ago, which still plays out at the boardroom table. So why would you want to reveal those kind of things? In today's world, especially in the world of all this espionage and all of that, where like CEOs and senior leaders' health is kept so privately protected to protect the share pricing. I think psychometric data also has to be protected. So these are some of the things
So
that.
Rahul, just to intervene here. So we are saying that so data privacy, all that taken. I'm just trying to understand that when it is with coaches, right? Like coaches are given the reports. Now you have the report with you, and you are to show up in a coaching conversation. Obviously there is ethics to it, and you will not use that data to lead your questions, is how I'm asking as to what do we do in that moment when you have the report and you have to manage a coaching conversation.
No, that I think is not so much the problem. I think it starts with clarity of communication to the participant. What is the purpose of this testing? How many times people come into a meeting with a coach and the first time they're talking, who's going to see my report? And are they going to like kind of decide my next step, my career? So you have like people don't even know if it's developmental or if it's evaluative. So there's lack of
Yeah.
communication.
Yeah.
Second thing is sometimes if people are need to be informed that hey, you know what, HR will see your report or this report will give to these two stakeholders. I think that needs to be just clarity. Similarly, they can opt out of the coaching intervention. I mean, like if they want to. Of course, people don't do all of that. So I think these are practical problems that have happened, especially in a country like ours where there's not so much of. Sometimes they just find people are very troubled, sitting with the psychometric, not knowing where all it's gone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I just to add what Rahul has said, I think as coaches, when we are using psychometric, I think what we can be very conscious about is not to label because we have access. So let's say I used an MBTI report and I found out that my coachee is an introvert. Let's say an introvert and the person is more of a sensing type. So the challenge I may face is in every coaching conversation, I may land up saying, because you're an introvert, this is so. I think there if you look at what are some of the ethical guidelines, what Rahul rightfully said, I think making sure that people have consent, you make sure there's confidentiality, you tell them who has access, who doesn't have access. Also making sure that you are transparent with why have you put it there. But I think more importantly, as coaches, when we are using it, like you said, you have access to something which may be personal, which may be something which is, an outcome of the way your initial socializing, etc. How do we not get biased with that? And how do we keep reminding ourselves, don't label a person like this? That is information meant for that person to kind of work on, to instead of, let's say, experience, you're using the assessment or you're using the psychometric to help the person get this kind of an insight. So I think there we have to be very conscious. And what actually helps, I have seen in some of my conversations, is a small kind of the mind exercise. This is something that I learned when I to be an NLP coach. So helping people to accept, being there with a lot more openness, and also helping me as a coach to make sure that I don't have my judging filters on at all time, or I don't keep remembering and I'm not biased. The little bit of a visualization, little bit of a grounding exercise, maybe through breath or doing a small kind of a gym exercise where you rub your hands together, or just make sure that you are very aware, you are a lot more calmer, and you do what is right in that entire conversation. So I felt for me as a coach, this was what sometimes came in the way. So reminding myself not to label somebody and to make sure that, you do justice. And it is only where it is to help them get that insight more easily. And your coaching journey can be a lot more comfortable. So that's a little bit from my experience.
Nandini, I've got to endorse that. That's a fantastic, insight, because I've been guilty of that with one of my own colleagues. Sometimes I might tend to say, hey, because you happen to be like this. Now, this is a lot more dangerous in the early stages. So one part is, okay, let's not pigeonhole people. All right. Know that people are much beyond their data, right? Data is just the map. Human beings are the real territory, right? They can adapt and flex if they want to. But the other part is, I find that in our real life also, especially when people are new to psychometrics and they start going through a test or whatever, it's so easy to get seduced into pop psychology and pseudo psychology, right? And you start talking. And you know what's even more dangerous is when you start talking about your own children in that way, right? So because then you might be actually pigeonholing them very early on. You got to be very, very careful. So one part is responsibility, and one is just plain stupid, not to get carried away with these things.
Yeah. Once you are identified as an INFJ, wherever you go, I'm an INFJ, as if, that just tells you about.
It's okay for the coachee to do that, but it's not okay for the coach to do it.
For the coach to do it. Yeah.
So definitely. I think it's so easy to get. You find early days, every time it's gone through the first book of psychology, try to analyze everybody. But I find as a parent, particularly, one has to be particularly careful. But I'm telling you, unknowingly, I've done that to my own colleagues sometimes, and that's the worst thing to do. That's a good pick, Nandi. I'm glad you mentioned that one.
Yeah, we're all human, so it's bound to happen. I think the default state is we will do that. By design, we have to figure out how not to be biased, how not to, judge others. So I guess, work, but we're all in the same boat, so it's okay.
Work in progress.
Yes.
Yeah. So we have 1 more minute, and I have this question here. We have this question here by Usha Shri, which is, I don't know if we have answered, Nandini, Rahul. How do we minimize the biases during the psychometric assessment? My question to Nandini, ma'am.
How
in a way, we covered the biases, right?
Yeah. It's more the bias. So there is no bias in the psychometric. The bias is the way you interpret, or you keep getting your attention back to what was the outcome of the psychometric. Because psychometrics won't have bias. It's just an exploratory tool. It's more fodder for someone to, reflect. You're just giving them aids to look deeper with some kind of certainty. You're just giving them tools. So there's no bias in that. But for us not to be biased, I think that requires effort.
And so much of it is the narrative that is passed down to us and our experiences that also creates our bias. Remember, a lot of these biases are only for self-protection.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think there is just one other question, which is, I don't know if we can take it now or you want to answer it later, which is by Vivekanand. The language of the tool many times becomes confusing when people are taking are not comfortable with English.
Yeah.
You have
And I
regional
think,
options. You have
yes.
regional options. And nowadays, there are different, languages. Translating is very simple. I think I don't know about the international tools, whether that is available.
Yeah, most of them have 30,
Yeah,
40 language options. There'll be
yeah.
7 or 8 English options also,
Yeah,
like
and
South
you can
African,
find simple
Australian.
tools. Yeah, you can find simple tools. You
But
don't need sophistication at all times. You can
so
find
one
simple
thing, yeah,
tools.
I think the value, I mean, so easy to think just because it's English, you can use each way. I was working with Stuart on a leadership team model. So naturally, I was helping him. He asked me to involve me. It's being sweet, I think, involving me. I wrote a few like narratives for that report that he's working on. And the first reaction was, "Wow, that English is too complex." So I said, "I never thought the time will come an Englishman will tell an Indian to calm his English down." He said, "The point is English is spoken differently. We find every possible angle to hammer it into the simplest version of English to make sure that it doesn't get biased." So that's a very relevant thing. I think older tests by design were not conceptualized for so many utilities, right? Earlier, a lot of tests were written with the assumption that there'll be some psychologist involved and all of that, who will be like administering them. So therefore, they were not consciously simplified. But today, people are like administering so much of themselves that the simplicity of the language is key. But to Nandini's point, yeah, there are tests that also have regional versions, and definitely all global tests have at least 30, 40 language options.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much, Nandini and Rahul. Wonderful. I think this time is not enough. We need to have another follow-up session soon in the coming months. So thank you all for joining in and for the lovely questions. If there are more questions, please drop in at support@Kocharya and we'll be happy to have Nandini and Rahul answer for you.
Yes,
Thank
thank you.
you.
On a working day, you have taken time out to
Yes,
come
yes.
listen to us. Thank you so very much and have a lovely evening ahead.
Thank you. Thank you.